relevant.
This meeting is being recorded.
Where did that voice come from? Okay, so a couple things. I have now posted the recordings of our class in the appropriate weekly folders. They're there as a YouTube link, right? So I've uploaded them to YouTube just like all the other videos, and then you've got a link in the weekly folder with a date for the Zoom. Vaughn, yes.
Yes. So I tried to access the PowerPoint on Blackboard, but it was not available.
Anyone else have that problem? Did other people access the PowerPoint on Blackboard?
I did, Professor.
Was there a problem?
There wasn't a problem on my side, no.
Okay,
I was
so
able
I'll
to
tell
see
you,
it.
there's some funny things with Blackboard about like, if you do it on a phone or certain types of devices, and sometimes what Blackboard will do, it says if PowerPoint has not loaded, opened up, click here. The one thing you want to make sure to do with any file, any type of, file that's been uploaded to Blackboard is to view it, whether it's a Word document, a PDF or a PowerPoint, you want to download it first. You do not want to try to view it through the apparatus of Blackboard, because that has all kinds of problems. But I don't think there's any problem with the file itself. Like, I don't think it's corrupted. So it might be the device you tried to open it on, and it may have actually given you a little pop-up saying, if it's not opening yet, click here. That's normally what it does. And I have to be honest with you, beyond that explanation, like I can't give you a more technical and satisfying explanation of what might be the issue. But I can say that from my end, I've had this content up on Blackboard for some time, like multiple semesters. And as far as I know, there's no real fundamental problem with any of the files that I have on there. Okay. You still have a question, or you just have your hand up?
I need to lower it, but that answered my question basically.
Okay, great. So what I'd like to do now is I just want to talk for maybe 10 minutes, and then I want to jump into the text. And I think we'll probably finish up a little earlier today than we did last week, because we went a long time the last 2 weeks. So Thomas Hobbes, I'm going to talk a little bit about his historical context that explains why he's talking about some of the things he's talking about. And that starts with giving you just a simple explanation of the excerpt we've been given. It's a chapter from a book called Leviathan. And in this chapter, as you all know, because you read it carefully, he talks about what he calls the, quote, natural condition of mankind. The natural condition of mankind. And he's trying to answer the question from his point of view, his opinion, and we may or may not agree with him, right? Whether this so-called natural condition, it's often called the state of nature, whether this condition is one of felicity or misery. Felicity or misery. First of all, we all know what misery is, right? It's a state of profound unhappiness, dissatisfying, troubling, anxiety-laden, everything that people don't want in their lives. Nobody, as Aristotle says, everybody desires to be happy. Every human being desires to be happy. But we all may disagree on what happiness means to us individually, but we all agree that we want to be happy. And if you ask a human, Aristotle has an interesting little line. He says, if you're asking the question of why a human being wants to be happy, then you don't get it. Because there really is no why a human being wants to be happy, other than our nature is built in a certain way. And this is a thing that we desire because it's a satisfying state rather than its opposite. So Hobbes is determined to answer a kind of question he's asking in this title, whether this natural condition is one of felicity or misery. So misery we can just translate as unhappiness. What does the word felicity mean? What's a synonym that we could use for felicity? It's a great name. Isn't there an actress named Felicity Huffman? What is felicity?
Is that, does
Don't
that,
all speak at once.
okay, does that word, could you use that it means like take, maybe like taking over?
No. Yes, Melanie and Tanya and Giuliani have it in the chat. Felicity is just, look, Hobbes is writing in the 17th century. He's writing in 17th century English. And this is why I asked you to define some of those rather unusual words that he uses, words that we don't come across in kind of our daily reading and writing, right? Felicity is just a fancy word for happiness, right? So there's two parts to this chapter. He's got two questions and they're interrelated. Number one, what is this natural condition as Hobbes understand it? And is this natural condition a condition of happiness or unhappiness? Now we'll come to what he means about this natural condition in a moment, but I think we can all answer this pretty easily. Is the natural condition one of happiness or one of misery?
Happiness.
Happiness? People being in a perpetual state of war, of all against all, is a state of happiness? I've got two miseries. How many people want to vote that the natural condition is a condition of misery for Hobbes? For Hobbes. I've got three miseries. What about the rest of us? Yes, thank you. It is absolutely a condition of misery. Question, do human beings want to remain in a condition of misery? Absolutely not, right? So Hobbes is getting at something very fundamental here and connecting certain themes and concepts to human relationships. There's three kind of interrelated things going on here. There's human nature in its needs and desires and its different motivations. And as part of human nature, we all desire to be happy. And those motivations, including the motivation for happiness, lead us into certain types of relationships with other human beings. This is one of the most important concepts of the class here. We all have different types of motivations and desires and needs. Life consists, for Hobbes, of wanting stuff, of desiring stuff, and then trying to go out and get it. I want food. I want water. I want sleep. I want sex for reproduction or pleasure. I want money, or things that are less material. I want recognition. What do we mean when we say someone wants recognition?
I'd say like attention.
Okay, so Melanie is very clever here. She is raising the concept of glory, which is a central concept for Hobbes, that for him, that this pursuit by human beings of glory leads into some of the most serious conflict between human beings. Giuliani calls recognition credit. I'm sorry, Daniel, what did you say? I cut you off. Sorry.
Oh no, that's fine. Actually, like her word better. I said attention.
No. Attention is great because that's like a really great simple word we use all the time. Somebody wants attention,
Right.
right? So can anyone expand on, so recognition is going to be a concept that we're going to be kind of like rolling around in our minds as a motivation of human beings that can bring us together in solidarity, but is also one that can bring us together in conflict. And Hobbes is particularly concerned with the problem of recognition because it necessarily seems to result in a kind of competitive game of sorts for attention of a certain kind. When we say someone desires to be recognized or they seek recognition, they want, what specific kind of attention are they looking for? There's something very specific they're looking for. And it has to do with them wanting some kind of credit. Absolutely. Can we be a little more specific about what kind of attention you're looking for when you say you want to be recognized? Question. What do people want to be recognized for? What do they want attention for? I'm going to skip over what Melanie's saying here for a second.
To be powerful.
Okay. And if you're powerful, you're more powerful than whom? Do people want to be equally powerful? Do people want to be recognized equally?
No, everyone else.
No.
Yeah. So one of the problems, one of the first things he does in his explanation of what the natural condition is he actually says all human beings are effectively equal. We see equality as an unmitigated good, especially in its legal and political manifestation, in recognizing human equality, right? We don't want to be recognized as inferior. Who the hell wants that? We want to be recognized as equal, right? But this is an interesting thing. He says he is actually one of the first philosophers, political philosophers, moral philosophers, to posit the concept.
Google Chrome, launch meeting dash.
Wow. He's one of the first philosophers to posit the concept of human equality, right? If we turn to Aristotle, for example, he says human beings are by nature unequal, and therefore society, political structure, law should not recognize them as equal. They should recognize them as unequal, right? Hobbes is a distinctly modern thinker because he's really one of the first thinkers of great import to posit human equality, and that human equality should be manifest in law and in politics. We have the concept of the rule of law where everyone's equal under law and treated the same by the laws and ruled by the same laws. That whole concept in many ways has its start with Thomas Hobbes. Okay, so the problem is we're all equal, but our desire for recognition inspires us to want to not be equal. We want more attention than the person next to us. And what do we really want attention for? It could be things like power or wealth or some type of status, but on the most basic level, we want our own worth and value recognized by other people. And the catch is that the game or competition for recognition is a kind of zero-sum game. If you are recognizing me as superior, you are by definition the inferior, right? It's like the Super Bowl. You can't, there's 32 teams in the NFL. You cannot have 32 teams win the Super Bowl. The whole concept of the Super Bowl is that one team gets recognized as superior to the rest for that year, right? In the game of recognition, there are no participation trophies, right? And so the moment one person gets recognized as superior in their worth, however that's defined, right? Like we said, money, power, so on. it means that there's another person recognized as inferior. And there, in that, you have the brewings of serious conflict between human beings. And it turns out that Hobbes sees this thing he calls glory as one of the most problematic psychological motivators in human beings, that is a source of profound conflict that he doesn't like. Because he actually, despite the fact that he's describing conflict, he wants to set up a society in which these types of conflicts are eliminated, right? Okay, and what is glory? Glory seeking is really, I think he would define it as just the highest form of recognition seeking you could find. Some people are honored, and other people, they don't seek just honors, but they seek glory. It's kind of like the superlative state of recognition. And that's really all he means by glory, right? I don't know, you could put it this way. Some people want to have a comfortable existence, but some people want to live in a penthouse in Midtown Manhattan. Some people want to be president of the United States. Some people want to rule over the whole planet or be an emperor of an empire, right? So you can see the radically different conceptions of like what people might desire and how it might come in conflict with other people. Okay. His book Leviathan is about devising a civil system of justice, a government to provide for security for human beings so they can pursue their own happiness, right? If you ask yourself, what is the function of government? It's there to protect us from, say, foreign invaders, but it's also there to protect us from each other. And even you could say protect us from ourselves. In most countries, actually, suicide is illegal, except in very rare circumstances, if at all, right? So government is there to keep us from this state of misery and conflict and what he calls this war of all against all, so that we can live in a more civilized manner and engage in activities other than conflict that might be more constructive, because as Hobbes is keen to acknowledge, this state of conflict is one that is destructive rather than constructive, right? And of course, here's the catch, that the source of this conflict in large part rests with the natural desires of human beings. And in fact, he points out that our own basic equality with one another is one of the main causes of the conflict. And this is an interesting question. When we say human beings are equal, the question is, what do you really mean? Because we know that human beings are not the same. Everyone is distinct and unique to some degree or another, number one. Number two, when you say human beings are equal, you're kind of begging the question of, in what way are you claiming them to be equal, right? So for example, our Declaration of Independence posits a very specific type of equality. It's not equality in every single facet of our identity. It's in one specific facet. Hobbes is going to have some interesting things to say about the way in which he believes human beings are actually equal. And to really understand the problems in this thing he calls the state of nature, we need to understand what he means by equality here. Equality in what, right? Okay. Why don't we talk for a second about this? Let me see what I have here. This natural condition, right? And I have this little phrase that the natural condition or the state of nature is a world without walls. And in that, I make a direct reference to mending wall. Everything we read this semester, there are going to be concepts that build off of one another from one text to the other. How would you, because this was one of the reading response questions, How would you define this natural condition that he talks about? What are the features of it? What are the characteristics of it? How do people live in this natural condition? What is there in this natural condition? And also what is lacking in this natural condition? So number one, it's a world of every human being for themselves. They're all seeking their own interest with an almost complete disregard for the self-interest or the interests of other people. Let's ask this. Are people really like this? Are they really this? Hobbes is always criticized for depicting human beings as kind of wickedly selfish and greedy, and so self-centered or egotistical that they ignore the well-beings of other people and really take no consideration for them. Do we think this is an accurate portrayal of human nature or no? It's your opinion. Do we think human beings are really like what's described by Hobbes? Are they really like this? Giuliani says no.
Muted. Alt plus A.
Melanie says sometimes. Many people say no. Anybody say yes? Where are my cynics? Where are my pessimists? Where are my misanthropes? Okay. So now I'm going to make a little caveat that the causes of the conflict within within the state of nature, the causes of the conflict are a combination of two things. Number one, something about human nature, but also something about the circumstances in which they're living in this thing that Hobbes calls the state of nature or this natural condition, right? And when those conditions kind of synergistically come in contact with certain antisocial elements of human nature, I think you're going to see why the conflict emerges and why people act the way they do in this state. And I think maybe you'll consider what he's saying is a little bit more plausible, because this state of nature is not a normal circumstance that we're familiar with. So I come back to this question. What is this natural condition? What is it like, but also what is it lacking? What is it lacking as well?
Hi, Professor.
Yes.
The natural condition is that when people are not under close supervision, they will do whatever that they like.
Okay. Very well put. Charity says that when human beings are not under close supervision, I like that, they will do whatever the hell they want. And of course, one thing we see, at least that Hobbes claims that people will want to do when they're not under close supervision, is things that are harmful to other people. Do we agree or disagree with that characterization? Anyone want to disagree that when human beings are not under close supervision, that they're going to do things harmful to other human beings? Anybody want to disagree?
Currently unmuted. Alt plus A.
Yeah.
Who's got the speak and spell speaking thing? Am I the,
It's me.
how do you do that on Zoom to make it do that?
Yeah, it's the type of computer that, I'm visually impaired. So
So it speaks for guys, so you know what's going on. Okay, now I know. Cool, thank you. All righty. So I don't see anyone disagreeing with the concept that when human beings are unsupervised, that they're going to do, number one, whatever they want, and number two, in doing whatever they want, they're actually going to harm other people. Think about that. Human nature could be such that in doing whatever we darn well please, we actually did things that did not harm others. This is fascinating. But it turns out, I think we all agree from our own personal experiences, because Hobbes is drawing on what people are really like. This isn't some kind of literary exercise. He's saying that when people do whatever they want, some of those desires are going to result in harm of one kind or another to other people, right? So now we need to clarify what this lack of supervision is in the state of nature. Can anyone clarify? So one of the big things you notice about the state of nature is that it lacks some things that are very crucial for society. And Charity described it as lacking supervision. Can we clarify what she means when she says these people in the state of nature or in the natural condition lack supervision? What things are we talking about? What things are missing? What things are missing in the natural condition? Okay, Melanie says morality, laws. What else? Why? Let's ask this. Why are there no laws in the natural condition? Why are there no laws? What's the big thing missing? So, thank you, Melanie. Very good. You're on top of it. Someone other than
government.
Melanie, explain this. Why are there no laws in the natural condition?
Because it's non-government.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you. Are we all clear here that in the natural condition, there is no government? And yes, Hobbes is going to call his government the Leviathan. And the Leviathan is a reference to a biblical figure that's a kind of a monster that instills the fear of death in everyone and inclines them to engage in peaceful activities because they have the bejesus scared out of them, right? The fear of death is the great thing that's going to encourage people to behave. And what is government going to do through its laws? It's going to instill the fear of death in everyone to compel them to do the right thing rather than the wrong thing. And that's basically engage in peaceful activities such that when they pursue their self-interest, because that's what everybody does, they're going to pursue it in a way that doesn't conflict with other people's well-being and doesn't conflict with the other people's well-being to pursue their own self-interest, their own happiness or felicity, right? What's the primary thing government does? So here we're in a world without government. And that's essentially what he means by the natural condition. There is a society of people living, but they don't have government over them. What's the primary function of government? Or the state, sometimes called?
to give laws and regulate.
Yeah, to make laws, to regulate the people or supervise them, to keep people in check, as Melanie says. That's very well, nicely expressed. Even ties in with like the concept of checks and balances in our government from the Federalist Papers. Question: why do people need government? To keep them in check. Why do people need government to keep them in check? What does this say about human beings that they need government to keep them in check?
To stop fighting.
Pardon?
Just to stop fighting.
Okay, but why do they need it to keep them from fighting? Why do human beings need government to keep them from conflict? Or the anarchy that we see here, right? And anarchy is literally a state in which there is no power over people and everyone is free to do whatever they darn well please. And it's obviously a freedom that we don't embrace. When we talk about American freedoms, we're not talking about the freedom to do just anything, right? I want someone to speak here. The comments are great because you're all going in the right direction, but I want to hear people speak. Why do we need a government to regulate our actions through law? What is it about human beings that necessitates government? That's part of the argument here he's making. Let's put it this way. Hobbes is saying, this is what human beings would do if you did not have government. Therefore, ergo, human beings must have government of a certain kind to prevent them from this destructive anarchy and chaos that I'm describing here in the natural condition. What is it about human beings that necessitates some form of government and laws that it would make and enforce? What do human beings lack on their own without government? Okay. Yes. Okay, so Melanie saves the day again. Human beings do not, this is Hobbes' argument. Human beings do not control themselves on their own. They're not capable. His argument is that most of humanity is not capable of self-governance. We're not capable of self-restraint. We're not capable of self-control. Since we can't control ourselves internally, we need some type of external institution to control us for ourselves. In a sense, that's just like parents with children. Children struggle to regulate their actions. They do things that are harmful to themselves and others, or just naughty or what have you. And the parents are there to set limits on their conduct and enforce them in a variety of ways, right? So the very existence of government and its laws and law enforcement of whatever kind is actually an insight into human nature, and it illustrates how human nature demands these limits, these restraints on our conduct. Okay, so government makes laws. Question: what exactly is a law? I don't want to get too philosophical here. What does a law consist of?
Enter mute currently.
Hi, Professor.
Yes.
I think it's rules and regulations of a land.
Rules and regulations of what?
A country.
Okay. All right. So number one, a law is a rule established in language by legislatures. Legislators are by definition people who make laws in government, right? So number one, laws are rules in words. Think of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not. Thou shalt not commit murder. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Those are laws, right? Religious laws, but nonetheless laws. Apart from the verbal rule, what else must be part of a law for it to be meaningful? Is a law just words?
Backed by an action.
Yes, you must have the power, you must have the institutions to actually compel people to follow the rules. So laws don't just have words written in books, right? but you have people like police and a justice system to enforce them in action, right? So if you don't follow the rules, someone can take you coercively out of society and put you in jail, right? And if the law doesn't have that part where they can physically do something to you, then the law is just a bunch of words. It's just like a moral precept that sounds really nice, but it has no effect, right? And so Hobbes is recognizing here that if you're really going to get people to do the right thing, you're going to have not only laws, but you're going to have an enforcement system that is, as he visions it, one of the primary functions of government, to compel people to do the right thing, right? And what we would call follow justice, right? To act in a just way. And, this raises a really disturbing question as to why people are good and why people are just. And I'm kind of using those words synonymously. Why do people follow the rules? Why do people do the right thing? Do they do it because they're genuinely decent people and they just have a warm, fuzzy heart? Or do they do it because they know if they did do it, they'd go to jail and they really don't want to go to jail, right? Hobbes says something very profound. He says the incentives for doing the right thing have to be greater than the incentives for doing the wrong thing. If there's no deterrent to doing the wrong thing, the human being is going to do the quote wrong thing because they can and they can get away with it. Okay. A famous 20th century sociologist, Max Weber, defined government or the state in the following way. He said that government or the state was the institution that had the monopoly on coercive power and force, right? And by coercive power and force, he means something like the police power to nab people off the street and throw them in jail against their own will. Think about it. Does a criminal want to go to jail? Duh, of course they don't. So when the police show up, the police have to take that unwilling suspect to jail, right? And so on and so forth. So Weber's definition of the state or government is very consistent with Hobbes, and really he kind of took Hobbes' idea from Leviathan and kind of boiled it down to a kind of an essence. But you see that government has this power to compel people to do things and even put people to death, right? And he described it as a monopoly, which is to say they have all of it, a monopoly on violence, right? Think about what the police can do. The police can use violence on people. Obviously, they do it unjustly. It happens. There's all kinds of problems in the criminal justice system, but police have the just use of physical force, of violence, right? They have the legal entitlement to use it under the right circumstances. And the government has the right to do that to its citizens under the right circumstances if the laws have been proven to be broken, right? They can throw you in jail or they could even put you to death. So think about the state of nature. The state of nature, or this natural condition, is, as Hobbes described it, it's a condition where every man has a right to everything. And when he says everything, he means literally in this state of nature without government, you can do whatever you damn well please because there's no law prohibiting you from doing it. And there's not even a moral code that prevents you from doing it. Hobbes makes one of the most radical claims about moral principles that was fundamentally contrary to the tradition of thinking about morality, right? And by moral principles, I mean, like, throughout history, coming out of the ancient world, right? If someone said, there may not be a law against murder, but murder is wrong, right? everybody would have agreed with that position. Hobbes comes along and says, since there is no state to define what is right and wrong, in the state of nature or in the natural condition, nothing is technically wrong. You can do whatever you want, not just physically, but morally as well. There's nothing wrong with doing whatever you want. The limitations on people's conduct of what's right and wrong, just and unjust, good and evil, only emerge when you have a state to define the very nature of what should be considered right and what should be considered wrong. And he kind of seems to be arguing against a notion of justice as being natural or universal, that it doesn't exist independent of like government itself. Okay. So I think what we should do here is to read. And let me say, today, students must read. I'm not reading. I have to say, last week, no student read. I don't think that's ever happened in any of my classes. And I've literally probably taught thousands of students. And I've never been able to not find one student willing to read. Okay. So what's the natural condition? It's a condition in which there's no government, there's no Leviathan, there's no state. In that sense, he describes it as natural. It's also natural in that mankind's nature is kind of freely expressed in this raw condition without the civilizing effects of things like government, right? Okay. So he starts out trying to establish the nature of human beings, at least dealing with the factors that are relevant to his discussion, right? So he paints a portrait of the human being, human nature as such, what human beings are like. Let me make this a little bigger. All right. Who would like to read for us, starting at paragraph 1? Kadiatu, can you read for us?
Yes.
Great.
Nature hath made men so eager in the faculties of body and mind, as the tough there be found one man sometimes manifestly stronger in body or of quicker mind than another. Yet when all is reckoned together, the difference between man and man is not so considerable as that one man can thereupon claim to himself any benefit to which another may not pretend as well as he.
Okay, great. Let's just pause there. Well, he says, for as to the strength of body, the weakest has strength enough to kill the strongest, either by secret machination or by confederacy, some vocab words, with others that are in the same danger with him. Okay, so the big question is Hobbes posits the equality of human beings. Let's be clear. The Declaration of Independence says all men, which means all human beings. That's what that word means there. All men are created equal. Does anybody know off the top of their head in what way the Declaration of Independence asserts human equality? What are we equal in? We all have what?
Freedom.
Very good. Very good. And the three freedoms are what in the Declaration of Independence? Blank, blank, and blank. Actually, not free will. I mean, that's part of it, but that's not the main thing that the Declaration points out. We all have the right to blank, blank, and blank. What did Jefferson tell us? No wonder we're going to have communism in this country. Jesus.
Freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, we have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Justice for all.
That's the Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah, so this is really crucial. The Declaration of Independence says we're all equal. And the way in which we're equal is what's often described as moral equality. As a human being, we're all morally equal. We're all morally entitled to the same rights and freedoms, exactly in the same way, right? Now let's look at Hobbes. Now that we all grasp that, I think, pretty clearly. Look at what Hobbes is saying, because he is not making the same claim about human equality. I mean, he may agree with Jefferson, and I think he actually does, but this is not the type of equality he's talking about here. He says nature, the thing that made us for him. He doesn't talk about God creating us. He says nature hath made men so equal. And when he uses the word men, he means human beings. Made men so equal in the faculties of body and mind. Question. Let's translate this into language we understand. What are we equal in exactly?
Space, mute currently.
Charity.
Mind.
Mind and what else?
And saying two things right now.
The faculties of body and mind.
Body.
Yes.
Mind.
So we're equal in body and mind. And then the question is, what does this word faculties mean? We're equal in the faculties of body and mind. It's a really crucial word. And once you get this word, it's going to unlock the rest of what he's saying. What does he mean by the faculties of body and mind? Anybody look that word up?
Is that grief?
Grief?
Professor, how about mental?
Yeah. So the mind has to do with mental phenomena and like psychological phenomena. And the body just has to do with physical phenomena. But what's this word faculties? Yeah, you can use the expression mental faculties. You can also use the expression physical faculties. Those are the two faculties he's talking about. But what does he mean by it? What is a faculty? For 1,000. How would you translate this word into your own language, your own way of speaking, rather than Hobbes' 17th century English?
Like have clear mind.
The what?
Like how to clear, think properly.
It's connected with that ultimately, yes. Okay, so Kadiatu and Melanie really have it nailed in the chat. Kadiatu says the capability to think, or the capacity or power. A faculty is an ability. It's a capacity to do something, and it ultimately represents a degree of power. What is power? Power is simply your ability to accomplish whatever your goal is. If you have the power, you have the ability, the capacity, the capability to achieve your objective, your desire, right? What is he saying? All human beings are equal in the powers of their body and their mind. Our mind allows us to do what? Generally speaking, in the broadest terms.
Space, view it currently.
Think.
Yeah, to think, to reason, to figure things out. Is being able to think and figure things out going to be important in the state of nature? Yes, why? Yes, why?
Because your mind will be able to tell you what's right and what's wrong.
Oh. Is there right and wrong in the state of nature? Does
No,
Hobbes know
no.
anything about right? So this is, he says morality does not, he says some shocking things, and we might not have time to really think about them through completely. We might touch on them next week when we look at Plato's Republic, because we're going to see a lot of synergy, but the connections between the two. He says there is no morality in this world of the state of nature. There is no consideration of doing, quote, the right thing versus the wrong thing, or the good thing versus the evil thing. But you're actually not too far off. What is going to be the role of thinking in the state of nature? Not to figure out what's quote unquote right, but to figure out what? What's your goal in this world of the state of nature? Glory is one thing, and it's not for everybody. I think there's something much more basic than glory that people need first in this world. It's what we all need too.
Power.
Power. Well, wait a second. We have powers of body and mind. The key here is we're going to use those powers for something. What are we going to use our power of thinking to achieve? What's the most basic thing we need to do in this world where everybody's in a war of all against all?
To achieve something for ourselves.
Yeah, but you're being too abstract. There's something very specific we need to achieve in this world.
To survive?
Yes.
Mm.
He says that the two primary goals of our existence are our conservation and our delectation. Did I ask you a question about those two terms?
No.
Okay. So somewhere, I think it's somewhere in this paragraph, we'll get to it in a moment. He says the two goals that we have as human beings are our conservation. Here he talks about our conservation, right? Well, I've got my arrow over it here. Conservation and our delectation. Conservation just means self-preservation. The first task, we can talk about what happiness means, but if you're dead, thinking about what happiness might mean is not really relevant anymore. So we need to survive first and foremost, right? In this world where there are all kinds of threats. There is the constant threat of violent death in this world. That's why this state is fundamentally one of misery. That's why this state is fundamentally unsatisfying and one we want to escape. Think about it. If you guys follow the news, you know this very well today. The government has all kinds of crazy powers to take your freedoms away from you, right? Look at Canada right now. They have this emergency powers. It's like martial law just because there's a bunch of trucks parked somewhere. It's crazy. Countries have locked down their own citizens. Australia has concentration camps for people who haven't been vaccinated. Like they literally do. That's not an exaggeration. And like young people have escaped from them, and then the police go and chase them down and drag them back. Crazy stuff. So you have to ask yourself a very good question. Why the hell would you ever give an institution called government so much power over your life? Well, Hobbes has the answer. And the answer is the state in which there is government and civil society has lots of problems, right? The problem of government having too much power over your freedoms. At least that's the old-fashioned American view. Now, you know, communism's a little different because government having all the power is great for communists. But the thing is, if government is a necessary evil, which means it's necessary, but it's imperfect, the state of nature is actually worse. And why is the state of nature worse? Because you're under the constant threat of violent death, which is something that a good government provides order and security, and you get liberated from having to think about the fear of violent death on a daily basis, which none of you really think about it. No doubt there are neighborhoods you walk through or times you walk down a street in New York and you don't feel so safe. But on the whole, you know that there is a system of civil society that's going to protect you for the most part, however imperfect it is. In the state of nature, you don't have that at all, right? So you're using your faculties of both body and mind, your powers of body and mind to stay alive. And if you're lucky, you can pursue things like glory and stuff like that. But I mean, to pursue glory, like you have to stay alive first. Okay. Let me ask it one more time. What is he saying we're really equal in? We're equal in our power. This is not about rights here, like the Declaration of Independence and Thomas Jefferson. He says we're all equal in our power. And the powers that we have as human beings that nature has given us are our powers of our body. What does that mean? It means like our physical strength, our speed, our agility. I don't know, our ability to throw a baseball or something like that. Whatever may be relevant in the circumstance you're in. And then powers of mind, powers of reckoning, reasoning, calculation, to outsmart. I think someone kind of said it. Yeah, Melanie said it. In this world, if you're not physically stronger than the other guy, you're going to have to use your wits and outsmart him. So one thing he touches on at the end of this paragraph is that he says, basically, some people are stronger and other people, and maybe a little less intelligent, and some people are smarter, but a little less physically, strong. Is it accurate? He says, what does he say? He says, he acknowledges that some people are quicker and some people are smarter. Some people are stronger and some people, he says, are quicker of mind or have a quicker mind. He says, yet when all is reckoned together, the differences between man and man basically cancel themselves out, right? So he doesn't pretend that people are absolutely the same. He says that in the big picture, in the aggregate, he says people are basically equal in terms of their power, right? Now let's imagine this for a second, just for simplification terms. Imagine we've got people with superior faculties of body. Let's just call them the jocks, right? I don't know, a bunch of meatheads who spend their whole week in the gym and they're all really strong, right? And then there are a bunch of, let's just call them the nerds and the geeks. They're all wimpy. They've never seen the inside of a gym. They can't dribble a basketball, what have you, just a silly stereotype, but they're the cunning, clever ones who can think things through clearly, right? Is it true that the two types of powers are going to cancel themselves out? And how does Hobbes describe them canceling each other out?
Professor.
because let me say this, when we think of power, our first thing we do, I think, is we think of physical strength. But we realize here that there are different types of powers that are advantageous in different circumstances, right? Charity.
Yeah, Hobbes is saying that the weak.
Yeah, what is that weak person going to do to survive in this world where where physical violence is a real threat?
Yeah, with the help of others, the weak can set something like an ambush.
Very well put. So he uses the word confederacy. And when we think of the word confederacy, we always think of like the Civil War era and the Confederates, you know, the Democrats who created the Confederacy, right?
Yeah.
But here he's using the kind of that's the Confederacy there is like a proper noun. Here he's using the word in its kind of original meaning. And con means like with, and confederacy like literally means a bunch of people getting together, right? So if I have one strong man, but I have 100 weaklings, the 100 weaklings are going to be able to outmatch the one strong man, right? So that's exactly what Charity just described. Now, what about this thing? He says either by secret, still looking at paragraph 1 here at the end, right here, either by secret machination or by confederacy, right? So we just explained confederacy. What the heck is a secret machination? What a great expression.
An ambush.
You want to clarify that a little bit? I don't disagree with you. An ambush is an example of a secret machination. Okay, good. Yeah. So Melanie, great. A secret plot or a trap, like machinations, they're like contriving a plan. And secret, obviously, when you contrive your plan to get the strong guy, you're not going to tell him. You're going to keep it a secret because you're just as an ambush, you're going to use the secrecy as an element of surprise to over and that element of surprise and secrecy is specifically designed to overcome the fact that he's physically stronger than you, right? So you're using your intelligence to compensate for your physical deficiencies, right? Okay. All righty. So that's really important. What am I going to say now? This is the most fascinating thing about Hobbes' understanding of human conflict. I think we would very often think that human conflict comes when there's a superior force with an inferior force. And that when one side is superior, since they have the advantage, they're just going to use that force on the inferior force, right? But here he says the conflict between human beings arises precisely because they are equal in their power, right? Let me ask this. If some schoolyard bully comes with a bat and is ready, like, and I have to just simplify here for like, you know, rhetorical effect. And the bully's got a bat and they want to bash your head in, or they threaten to bash your head in. And they say, I'm going to bash your head in unless you do this. Are you going to try to fight them?
No.
Yeah, assuming you're completely inferior in terms of your ability to fight back. No, you're not going to fight them. You're going to accept their terms in exchange for not getting your head bashed in, right? So you're going to capitulate to them. And in this world, like, that produces things like masters and slaves, right? If you think about like war in the ancient world, when one army conquered another, the conquered and captured soldiers became slaves because they could choose slavery or they could choose death. And they liked their lives enough to accept slavery, right? We're not talking about like racialized slavery with the American South, which is in many ways a different ball of wax altogether. So here's what Hobbes says. It's precisely because we're equal in the schoolyard that we're willing to engage in the fight. If the other guy comes to the fight with a bat, and then I say, haha, guess what? I'm just as strong as you, and I have a bat too. And the one guy says to me, you better put down that bat and accept my terms, or I'm going to bash your head in. Well, then what are you going to say in response? You're going to say, guess what? I have a bat too. And if you don't put down your bat and accept my terms, I'm going to bash your head in because I think I can beat you. And the problem is when people are effectively equal in terms of their power, their force, or their ability to execute their will, right? They both believe that they can actually succeed in beating the other person. So guess what? Because they believe they can beat the other guy, they try to beat him, right? Does everybody get that? Okay, that's really crucial. And it's one of the most fascinating facts about human equality. I think you'd be naturally inclined to think that human equality of this kind would result in peace. But he's actually saying it results in conflict. Now, remember what he's talking about here. He's not talking about equality of freedoms or moral equality or equality of human rights. He's talking about equality of power, right? Power is your ability to achieve your goal. Okay, so let's pick up with paragraph 3 here, and we'll go about 10 more minutes or so. Who could read for us? I need a volunteer. Yalen, can you read for us? What about Myra? Can you read for us, Myra? Oh, Myra, you need to leave. Kenya, can you read for us?
Sure.
Okay, great.
From where to where again?
Paragraph 3, starting in there.
Okay. From this equality of ability, how you pronounce that? Arises?
You just say arises.
Arises. Equality of hope in the attaining of our ends. And
Okay,
therefore,
pause right there. So from this equality of power, ability, power, all the same thing, arises equal hope of each party attaining their own ends. What are our ends? They're just our goals, the things we want, right? All right, you keep going.
And therefore, if any two men desire to the same thing, which nevertheless they cannot both enjoy, they become enemies, and in the way of the end, which is principally their own conservation and sometimes the delectation, only endeavor to destroy or subside one another.
Okay, so this is his first explanation because there's multiple ones. So what is he getting at here? In the natural condition is natural in the sense that it doesn't have government, but it's also natural in that what is operative primarily is just kind of raw human nature and its natural inclinations, right? And as we've established, from equality come the problems, right? So what are our goals in life? He says good night, Myra. He says all human beings desire essentially the same broad things. They desire their conservation and sometimes their delectation. Conservation is just survival, to conserve the body as a living thing rather than a dead thing. We would call it self-preservation. We want to live rather than die. Delectation, I think, is just a fancy word. What does this word mean? Delectation? Anyone have any sense? It means pleasure. how do we typically define happiness? Happiness, I think every human being defines as some form of important form of pleasure. So he says, we principally desire our conservation. And why is it sometimes our delectation rather than all the time? Because if we're pursuing our self-preservation, we can't always pursue our pleasure. Once we're alive and we're not being threatened by anything, then we can pursue things that are pleasurable as well, right?
Mhm.
So look at what he says. If you're in this world of the war of all against all, you're spending most of your time preserving yourself and not enjoying yourself, right? We would like to enjoy ourselves, but we can't always. So look at this. From these features of human nature and these motivations and this equality of power, you start to see something fundamental about how human relationships work in this world without government, right? He says, if any two men desire the same thing, they're both after the same thing, which nevertheless they cannot both enjoy. They become enemies. Now think about it. What is this thing that they might desire that's the same thing? Imagine that they're both hungry and there's one tree in the whole forest with one apple, and they both see the apple, and they actually don't want to be in conflict with one another. They're not saying, I hate you, you hate me, and I'm gonna bash you over the head. They're both just saying to themselves, I'm damn hungry and I want that darn apple. So they both go for the apple at the same time, and what happens?
They fight over the apple.
Yeah. So let's just say conflict, right? They didn't intend to be in conflict with one another, but conflict is produced by the scarcity of resources. There's only one apple. Think about it. If these guys were in a forest of all apple trees and there was a boatload of apples, they wouldn't necessarily have come into conflict at all, right? Because the one guy says, well, gee, I'll pick from this tree. I'm actually scared of that guy. I don't want to get near him because he might bonk me on the head. I'm afraid of him. So I'll stay over here. But when there's one apple left, the fear is going to have to go and they're going to have to be in conflict. What is scarcity? Scarcity is the idea that there are limited resources. There's not like magical abundance of everything. If you're familiar with the Garden of Eden, right? They have this tree of life and all the other trees with the fruit on it. And it's a condition of abundance where there's no scarcity. And because there's no scarcity, there's no conflict either. Here, the scarcity produces the conflict because human nature demands that we eat, if we're talking about the apple. Okay. Kenya, were you reading for us? Who is reading for us?
Yes, it was me.
Yeah, you want to keep going?
Okay. And from hence it comes to pass that where an invader hath no more to fear than another man's single power. If one plants, sow, build, or possess a convenient seed, other may probably be expected to come prepared with forces united to dispossess and deprive him, not only of the fruit of his labor, but also of his life or liberty, and the invader again in it the like danger of another.
Okay, so everything he talks about in paragraph 3 has to do with some of the basic physical necessities of life, the needs we have physically to survive, right? And here he acknowledges that why would you ever plant? He talks about sowing, that's planting food. Why would you ever build something when you know that any moment someone can come along and just take it from you? One of the problems of the state of nature is it's going to incline people not to engage in the projects that make civilization what it is: farming, building things that if they're not protected will just be taken. And you see in this world, there's no concept of property, right? One of the main things laws do is they establish the concept of property, and that if someone tries to take something from you, that they'll be punished by the law for doing it. And what that results in is they stop attacking you for it. Okay. So now he's going to give another explanation in paragraph 4. You want to keep going, Kenya?
Okay. And from this difference to one another, there is no way of any man to secure himself so reasonable as anticipation. That's it, by force or while, to master the persons to all men he can, so he will. So long he see no another to the power, to other power great enough to endanger him. I'll continue.
Yeah, let's go to the rest of the paragraph.
And this is no more than his own conservation required, and is generally allowed. Also, because there is some that taking pleasure is completing their own power in the act of conquest.
So here's where the glory part comes in.
Okay, which they pursued farther than their security requires, if others than otherwise will be glad to be at easy within modest bound, should not be invasion increase their power. They will not be able long time by standing only under defense to subsist,
yes.
And by consequence, such argumentation of dominion over men being necessary to a man conservation is out to be allowed him.
Okay, great. So on the next page, he's actually given you his 3 fundamental causes for human conflict in general, but particularly in the state of nature. And they have to do with our needs and desires, needs of the body, and also psychological desires that bring us into conflict. The first one is this equality of power combined with our need for things externally, but under conditions of scarcity where there's not enough to go around to everyone. The second here, at the beginning of paragraph 4, he talks about diffidence. Diffidence. That was a word I asked you to define. What does he mean by diffidence? Anybody? Diffidence.
I was a little confused on that one, so I got like to secure himself. So like the reasonable anticipation. I was very confused.
You're just about there. What is diffidence? I mean, if you don't know the meaning of the word, you can look it up.
It's fear.
Okay. I'll give you the definition from Google. And I agree with you. It's basically fear, right? And diffidence here is described as modesty or shyness resulting from lack of self-confidence, right? So we could just kind of morph that. Diffidence is distrust. I think the word is actually mistrust, Melanie, a lack of confidence, and therefore a fear. Question is, a fear of what? Fear of what? Distrust of what? We're in the state of nature, in this war against all. Who are we fearful of?
Fear of our enemies.
Yes. And who's an enemy? Everybody we might potentially come in conflict with. Why? Because there are no laws to guarantee that they're going to be peaceful with us. So what does he talk about here? In the first one, we have a common object. We go for it, that apple, and we end up in conflict. Here, because we know that there's no power to control other people from bonking us over the head, we're constantly in a state of fear about what other people are going to do to us in a future moment.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to respond as intelligent beings to a condition in which we know at any moment we might get bonked on the head ourselves? What are we going to do to compensate for that? What are we going to be forced to do? Notice he's not talking about evil people who want to hurt other people. He's talking about people being motivated about the fear of death, something that we all are going to have, whether we think we're good or bad people. It doesn't matter. Human beings in this condition are forced to act like this, whether they're good or bad. And we can see in a sense why the very concept of good and bad doesn't matter. What are we going to do as people who are afraid of our neighbors? Think of mending wall. We're afraid of our neighbor. He's going to bonk us on the head like an old stone savage. What are we going to do?
We'll separate ourselves.
We could. What else could we do? How might we use our intelligence, our faculties of mind, to compensate for a situation in which we're afraid at any future moment our neighbor might bonk us over the head? I know what I'd do. Yeah, Melanie has it again. You got like 1,000 bonus points here, Melanie. Nice job. You're going to take a remember well, you don't remember the Iraq War. We're going to preemptive war. Before that guy bonks me on the head, before he shows me that he wants to bonk me on the head, I'm going to sneak up behind him and I'm going to bonk his ass on the head first, because I'm a smart person. And I'm going to take out the threat before the threat can be a threat to me. Now you can see in this world that that's not really a permanent solution, right? But you can see how conflict is going to be inspired. You don't want to go bonk that guy on the head, but the moment you recognize he might do it to you, you realize you might have to preemptively bonk him on the head. Major problem. And then he talks about something else. We come in conflict out of competition. We come in conflict out of fear of what other people's might do to us, and we act preemptively. And then the third one he says is that there are certain people who take pleasure in contemplating their own power in their acts of conquest. And these are the people who want to bonk you on the head simply for the pleasure of doing it, because they want recognition. They want to be place themselves in a position of superiority to you. Notice the first two explanations don't involve that motive at all. Okay, so just a couple more minutes here. Kenya, could you read from number 5 just a little bit more?
Okay. Let me see. Again, men have no pleasure, but in the contrary, a great deal of grief in keeping company when there is no power able to without them for all.
Okay. There is no power to overawe them all. What is Hobbes talking about? This thing that's missing, that the thing that is, there's no power able to overawe. What is that power that would overawe everybody? And keep them from being violent? What is that thing that's missing in the natural condition?
No.
And more broadly, what makes the laws?
The rules.
He's absolutely including those things, but he's thinking bigger. Yes, the Leviathan, the government, a state itself.
Mm-hmm.
And notice how he describes what he sees its function as: to keep you in awe, like the word awesome, right? Awe.
Mm-hmm.
But what he really, I mean, the word that he's really using here is fear. He got the function of the Leviathan, this monster from the Old Testament, the book of Job, right? The government is to keep everyone in fear that if they ever break the law, what's the ultimate fear? There's kind of two ultimate fears for every human being.
Death.
Number one, death, and what else?
And hell.
The two fears that are going to keep people from bonking each other over the head, because they're going to be so freaking scared about these fears that they're not going to do it. They're going to be peaceful.
And punishment.
I like, yeah. So death is the ultimate punishment, right? Obviously, the fear that the government instills is the fear of punishment, right? And that you'd rather give up your desire to harm the other person because you're so scared that you don't dare engage in your desire. Isolation is a good one. I mean, you think about what jail is, it isolates people, and that's part of the punishment, a big part. But one thing I'm thinking is a little more cosmic or religious here. I'm thinking like the concept of hell, right? You can think about the concept of hell as just a religious concept and that hell exists, but you can also think about hell as a tool. I mean, it's bad enough to die, but imagine if your soul is then going to go on and live in eternal damnation. That sounds even worse because you only die once, but you live in eternal damnation forever and ever and ever and ever. That's like a really long time. And that sounds really miserable, right? So the government, its function is actually to instill terror in people, the fear of death, so that they do the right thing. Okay. All right, you want to read this last sentence here, Kenya? And then we'll just go a hair longer and call it a night.
Okay.
For every man looketh.
For every man looketh that this companion should value him at the same rate he set up to himself, and of all signs are committed, or on the valuing naturally endeavors, and far as he dares, which among them that have no common power to keep them in quiet in far enough to make them destroy each other, to assert a greater value from his commenters by damage and from others by sample.
Okay, great. So the common power or the lack of common power, again, he's referring to government. Government is common over its citizens in that it enforces the same laws in the same ways over everybody, right? They're all subject to the common rules, right? You want to keep going? So here he sums it up at paragraph 6.
So that in the nature of man, we find 3 principal causes of quarrel. First, competition. Secondly, difference. Thirdly, glory.
Diffidence, not difference, but diffidence.
Oh, diffidence, sorry.
So he's basically explained, yeah, why don't we read 7? Because here he's recapitulating what he's already talked about. It makes it very clear.
The first market meant invade for gain. The second for safety, and the third for reputation.
Okay, so he's arguing here that there are 3 fundamental kind of psychological causes of conflict. One is we have needs. We want to gain things, we want to get things. Second, we fear for our lives and we want to be safe. So we take preemptive actions against others. And then the third, reputation. And the ultimate form of reputation for Hobbes is glory, which is like the highest form of honor and recognition that one might achieve. You want to keep going?
The first use violence to make themselves master of other men's persons, wives, children, and cattle. The second to defend them. The third for trifle as a word.
Like trivialities.
I'm sorry?
Trifle is like something trivial, something superficial.
Okay. As a word, a smile, a different opinion, and any other sign of undervalue, either direct in their persons or by the reflection in their kindred, their friends, their nation, the procession of their name.
Good. So he seems to kind of believe, Hobbes does, that the first two causes of conflict, meaning gain and safety, are kind of like justifiable. But when he talks about reputation, he has a much more negative view, right? People will go into conflict for trivialities, trifles. If they're not looked at, think about, I don't know, like gang members or something. If they're not looked at the right way, if they're not spoken to the right way, they decide they've been disrespected and they want respect. I want my props, right? Let me give you a interesting, maybe I told this example, but I guess I was looking at social media. No, it was a news story. You know, it was one of the local news stories in New York. And there was a fight that broke out between two guys on a subway car on the 6th train at 103rd Street, right? You know what they were fighting over? They were fighting over a seat on the train. They were fighting over the same seat on the train. One guy wanted that seat. The other guy wanted that seat, kind of like the apple, but it was a little different. In the apple story I gave you, there was only one apple in the whole forest. So you know why they're going for the same apple. This explains what recognition really is, right? But one of the funny things, you know, it was shot on like a phone video, whatnot. There was something funny you noticed about the train car when it kind of panned to the whole car. Anybody have any thoughts about what that might be? How many seats were available on that train car?
Maybe more than one.
Yes. And not just like more than one, like the whole car was practically empty. And these guys got, when you're talking about fighting over reputation, you're talking about like a pissing contest. I want my props. Me getting that seat is not just about me needing to sit down and rest my legs. It's about you recognizing me. And when I tell you that I want that seat, you better damn well give it to me, right? The train car was almost completely empty. These two gentlemen could have sat anywhere they wanted. Because they had to get their props, they fought over that one seat. So, and if you don't believe that, I mean, this is Hobbes' story here of the person, you know, who gets in a fight with someone else because they looked at them the wrong way, right? And that's reputation, right? That's recognition. Okay. So let me just, yeah. So Hobbes has this fascinating notion here. We'll just kind of conclude that in this state of nature is a war of all against all, and nothing is unjust. And he essentially claims that justice is not natural. It doesn't kind of exist in the world. It's something that's fashioned once government is in place to create boundaries and rules and restraint on people's conduct so that society can be peaceful and engage in all these things that we want to engage in. We don't want to be in conflict. Think about it. Mending wall. The state of nature is a world without boundaries, without walls. We put up the boundaries, the mending wall, and what does it actually do? The boundaries on our conduct in laws, in rules, in enforcement of them allows us to actually coexist peacefully and engage in constructive activities. And I'm not going to read it now because we got to get going here. But in this wonderful paragraph, paragraph 9, he talks about all the trappings of civil society, of civilization itself, that cannot occur in the state of nature because nobody would bother and nobody is capable of engaging in them because there's too much conflict for them to really occur properly. So there's a great little line here at 14. He says, there are passions that incline men to peace. And he also has been, what has he been talking about the whole time? He's been talking about passions, emotions. A passion is just an emotion that motivates someone to act. He's been talking about passions that incline men to conflict. And he says, in human nature, in human psychology, there is also a passion. There is also an emotion, a desire that incline men to peace. What is the passion that inclines men to peace rather than conflict?
Agreement.
What's that?
It's an agreement.
Oh, no, forget about it. Forget about it. No one's going to be obliged to agree in this world unless they're forced to agree. What is going to incline men, human beings, he means, to be peaceful with one another? What is the passion that the Leviathan and Hobbes are going to appeal to and exploit to create the conditions of peace?
Justice.
Oh, come on. No. For Hobbes, there is only self-interest. There is only what you want. Now, you can disagree with Hobbes, and that's a whole other ball of wax we can kind of talk about as we go forward in the semester. But all he sees, people don't want justice, except when it benefits them. We'll see that in the Republic. They don't want justice. They want what they damn well want. They don't follow justice unless it benefits them. That's one of the lessons of next week's reading. And I think Hobbes agrees with that. If you want people to be peaceful and regulate themselves, or you have to exploit a passion that's going to get them to be goody two-shoes, to be good little boys and girls and get on Santa's list. Well, Melanie has the answer once again.
Fear, scared.
Fear of what?
Death.
Yes. It's not in this section, but Hobbes basically says life consists of human beings having desires and seeking to fulfill their desires. And that happiness or human satisfaction comes from having desires and having them fulfilled. Anybody want to argue with that we'd all like our desires to be fulfilled? So when you're dead, that's one state in which you can neither have desires nor have them fulfilled. So everybody is terrified, most everybody. There are some funny exceptions. Not everybody's totally afraid of death, and Hobbes is kind of concerned with that problem. So what is the passion that inclines men to peace? It's basically the fear of death. He also talks about the desire for what he calls commodious living. That means comfortable self-preservation. That means I got a car, I got an apartment, I got some nice food, I got a bottle of wine, comfortable living, right? But we're not going to be concerned about living comfortably if we're not alive. Like, we have to be concerned with living first. So fear of death is really the primary instigator, right? And so what is the Leviathan going to do? It's going to punish people very often with capital punishment, with death. And it's going to instill, for Hobbes, literally the fear of God in these people to do the right thing. And in the next section, I just want to read this one passage. It's brief. He explains exactly what he hopes from the Leviathan. Okay, here it is, right here. Right down here. Let me make this a little bigger. Pardon me. Okay. Could someone read from the therefore? Kenya, are you up for it one last time?
I guess. Therefore, before the names and of just or just and unjust can have place. Sorry, I'm just trying to read from the computer. I'm a little off. There must be some conceived power to
Coercive
compel.
power.
Can you put a little bigger because I can see?
Yeah. You might need to also make it bigger from your end.
Okay. Therefore, before the name of just and unjust can have place, there must be some conceived power.
Coercive power.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Coercive.
Coercive power to compel men equally to the performance of their covenants by the terror of some punishment greater than the benefit they expect by the breach of their covenant, and to make good that property which by mutual contract men acquire in recompense of the universal right they abandon. And such power there is none before the erection of a commonwealth.
Okay. So he says before government, when there's no government, there is no concept of just and unjust. They have no place. He says to have the existence of justice, right? To talk about just and unjust is to talk about justice, right and wrong. He says before you can have justice, there must be some coercive power. What coercive power is he talking about? Coercive means like the power to force people to do something. When you coerce someone, you force them even against their will. Murderers, let's just say, want to murder, but there's a law to force them not to murder. What is the coercive power that he's talking about?
The government?
Yes. And he is conceiving of government itself as a coercive power that regulates people's conducts and forces them to be peaceful. So we don't have this state of anarchy and destruction, but we have a society of, we would say, law and order, right? I mean, Hobbes is like the original law and order guy, right? And his argument is basically when you have law and order, you have security. When you have security, you don't have to be worried about feeling threatened, and you can go and start creating things for the well-being of society and yourself. So what is the function of government? It's a coercive power to compel, to force men equally to the performance of their covenants. Now, covenant here is a biblical word, like Noah enters in a covenant with God. He's going to follow certain commandments, certain rules that he's been given by God. And if he doesn't, he's going to be punished in various ways. We could just say the covenant here that men must perform is, let's just say very simply, they must follow the laws. They must follow the rules. And of course, the catch is the rules are that they're forced to follow prevent them from doing things that they might otherwise want to do. So it's not easy for human beings to follow the rules. How is the government going to force people to follow the rules? Here's the catch. He says we're going to force them by the terror of some punishment that is greater than the benefit of what they can expect by breach of their covenant, by breaking the rules. The way you get people to behave and be good, first of all, there's no notion that like there are people out there that are naturally good. People, good fences make good neighbors. People are made good by the terror of some punishment that is bigger than the benefit they think they might get by breaking the rules. I don't know. Think about to the ancient world. Thieves very often would receive capital punishment. That means they could be killed by the government for trying to rob somebody. If you're afraid of being killed by the government for just stealing something, you are now going to think twice about stealing something, because the punishment is much greater than the benefit you might get by breaking the rules, right? So you now have incentive not to break the rules. There's one catch. What if you rob the bank and the police aren't there? How does Hobbes, or how does society intend to deal with the person who robs the bank and on that day the police just don't happen to catch them and never do? Any thoughts about that?
Question again.
You want me to state it again?
Yes, please.
Most people, if they break the law, I think they get caught, especially if you commit a serious crime. The justice system, police force, is pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. How is this world going to deal with the person who breaks the law and actually gets away with it? What's going to, because we all know that sometimes police are not around, right? There's not, crooks get away with stuff, right? They do get away with stuff. And they hope to get away with stuff. I mean, obviously, when a crook robs a bank, they're hoping they're not going to get caught. What's going to discourage them from even trying? Well, it has something to do with the fear of death. What concept does religion invent that even if the police don't catch you, God will?
Punish you.
What's that?
God will punish you.
Yeah, I mean, how, basically, in the general sense? What happens to you?
You die.
Yeah, guilt and hell, right? Well, let's be really like realistic. Excuse me. We're just about done here. And I mean that absolutely. I think people like Hobbes, and even next week, Plato, guilt is for people who get caught. I've heard many police officers and like judges and lawyers and whatnot, they talk about it. The people who show guilt are the ones who get caught. And the reason they show guilt is not because they really feel guilty. It's because they want to show all the other people that they feel bad about what they've done, so they get a lesser sentence, right? When people don't get caught, not all of them feel guilty, right? Not all of them have a conscience. And it lets you realize that conscience and guilt is a product of the threat of being caught, of the fear of being caught. So yeah, hell. Hobbes is not quite satisfied with the concept of hell. And I think if you read carefully, we've read a couple of these passages, but he says this many different ways over and over again, and he starts making a point. This Leviathan, this system of government that is there with the coercive power over everyone, he really wants it to instill a kind of terror and awe, by which he really means fear, right? And I think he believes that the people, even they're not going to do something criminal even when the police are not around, because they're going to be so terrified by the Leviathan that they're going to be disinclined to commit the crime, even if they actually might have been able to get away with it. And of course, the concept of hell performs the same function. If the police or the Leviathan miss your crime, well, God is all seeing. He doesn't miss it. And if you get away from the police, once you die, God is going to make sure to punish you in the afterlife by putting you internally in hell. And therefore you have incentive to not commit the crime. Okay, we got to get going here, but many of these issues are going to be on display next week. in the reading on Plato. I'm going to put up a video on Plato by Friday to deal specifically with the Republic, because I haven't done that. But let's just say that we've kind of seen an explication here of Robert Frost's Mending Wall, of why good fences make good neighbors. And Hobbes is absolutely of the school that it's only good fences, meaning good government, good laws, good law enforcement in the general sense, that make good neighbors, because people are naturally inclined to do things that put us in conflict with one another, right? And this is a disturbing, and we may not all agree with his characterization of human motivation, but one of the disturbing things we're seeing in Hobbes and even Mending Wall is that we have a lot of natural desires that incline us to be in conflict with our fellow human being, which is funny because I think our first reaction is we want solidarity, we want connection, we want intimacy, we want camaraderie from other human beings. But here we can see that there's a lot of potential for conflict, especially if the conditions to eliminate the conflict are not provided for. Yep. Okay. Thoughts, question, comments before we get going here? Okay. So just a reminder, if you attended tonight, make sure to email me, right? Kenya, thank you for a great job reading. I really appreciated that, and I think everybody else did too. And Melanie, thank you for all your analysis there, because you were right on tonight. You read very carefully, so that was great. So Giuliani, in terms of the commenting, I checked the comments, yes. And basically it becomes part of your Giuliani, yeah, part of your participation grade. Okay, all righty. Have a great night, everybody. I'll have this video posted up in the next day or two.
Zoom meeting.
And Charity, very nice job. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Professor.
Have a great night.
You too.
Professor, sorry, can I talk to you?
Oh, yes, yes, sure. Let me just wait half a second. I'll turn off the record.
All right.